I give it a.
All right, so we are now going live. This is the Oracle In podcast. This is episode number 2. My name is Eric, and I'm joined by Kevin and Laquan. What's up, guys?
Hey,
What
how's it
up?
going?
Hi, friends.
So yeah, we're going to try to get into some kind of a format with the show here, and what we're going to try to experiment with is that we're going to start off with some kind of a current event, just to kind of talk about what's in the news, what are some of the headlines maybe that we're all reading, have a brief discussion about that, and then launch into a particular topic that might help to flesh out some ideas. So for today, what's the current event we're talking about, guys?
Colin Kaepernick. I thought this was a very hot topic. You know, if anybody doesn't know, Colin Kaepernick chose to enact a silent protest during the national anthem during the game. And when asked afterwards why he did it, just to kind of paraphrase, you know, he didn't want to stand while there's injustices going on in the black community and other minority communities as well. And now there's big uproar all over the place because of that.
Yeah, he added on that statement, there are bodies in the street and people getting paid leave and getting away with murder. So it was it was a pretty bold call out on his part. But it seems like some of the fallout is really mixed. There's you got Matt Hasselbeck was saying, easy way to make sure you're not the starting quarterback on opening day, hashtag September 11th.
Wow. Yeah, so what I thought was interesting is some of two blowbacks that I saw. One is that, yeah, you have a lot of military folks that are out there being like, dude, this, you know, putting your hand over your heart is about, you know, recognizing those who have put their life on the line for you to have those freedoms. But then the other side of that is that if you've seen the litany of racist comments that have come out against him, is like, okay, that's kind of why he did that.
Ooh, I got to go on Twitter and look.
Yeah, I've seen that too. And actually, I'm glad you brought that point up about the military. You know, to me, man, you know, the way I look at it is you can still acknowledge the injustices that's been happening under that flag and still like the military as well. He didn't say at any point in time, nor is that a protest against the military. Listen, I served 8 years in the Marine Corps, been to Iraq, did everything. But I still recognize what's happened under that flag too. And if I chose not to stand, or not to put my hand over my heart, or put my hands in front of my, you know, kind of standing in front, it doesn't mean that I'm disrespecting the military. And I just think that's a very, people reach with that. And it kind of it upsets me a little bit, because when you think about it, let's acknowledge what's happened under that flag to various minority groups, especially the black community. All right, that stuff did happen. That is a historical fact. And it's still happening today. So him not standing is not giving a big FU to the military at all, because you could still respect the military and what they've done, but acknowledge what's happened to the people, you know, to blacks and other minority groups under that flag. That's just the truth. It's not all the same. You don't have to lump them together.
Yeah, it sounds like some of the fans are burning his jersey in protest of his protest.
Yeah, I think, Q, to your point, I think we all need to understand that a little bit, that the flag represents more than our military. And because we have such a dominant power with that military, people somehow automatically associate that the only thing that flag stands for are, the 4 or 5 branches of our military. One of the things that I've also noticed when it comes to how we approach other countries, and especially what I've heard from the hard right, the conservative, libertarian groups out there, are when people want to attack Obama for not using the military more forcefully, for example, like with Iran. And the one thing that I'm trying to wrap my head around is kind of coming back to like this image of the flag. It's because he chooses diplomacy first, which should always be our first approach. You know, it's try to build those connections, try to build those bridges, and only as an absolute last resort, if something breaks down that we have to actually defend, then maybe there could be, an argument made for the military being used at that point. But I don't know. I think people are getting carried away with this image of the flag being directly associated with our military, like after 9/11 is a good example.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up, I was Eagle Scout and, went in the military myself, and I look at the flag as a piece of cloth. Like, to me, it doesn't really, I understand that people get really, sentimental and attached to to that as the symbol, but when did we become so thin-skinned as a nation that we can't even, look at ourselves and critique who we are, what we're doing? And heaven forbid this piece of cloth that hangs up, people, freak out if you don't, bow down to it. And, if you have the audacity to have a different opinion, you're attacked. I don't get it. I mean, I've had friends growing up that, would freak out if someone had a T-shirt that had the American flag on it. You're not supposed to do that. Come on. I mean, really? Is that the biggest problem we're facing right now? Is someone keeps, sitting down when there's the national anthem? Like, well, it's a good thing that whole, pesky world hunger and climate change and all those other things got handled. And we could focus on the real problem, which is not bowing down to this traditionalist idea of the flag being the holy deity, golden calf of America.
And I totally agree with that. And another big point too is, why aren't we commending him for that? Like, the point is, whether you agree with him or not, the point is he made a stand. And he said something he believed in. Now, maybe you might side with him, maybe not. But the point is, he went out there, and he made a protest. And he's even risking sponsorships, on top of that. That's how he feels. I don't think nothing's wrong with that. We always say this country is all about free speech, but the moment you exercise it, you might as well get the pitchforks out, and burn them at the stake. Yeah, that's pretty much what they're doing to him, But he's conscious. People want our athletes to be dumb, or they only want certain athletes to talk, So I don't think nothing was wrong with what he did at all, And I think I've seen a lot of the reactions on Twitter and on Facebook. People react quickly, and it's just like, oh, I can't believe he did that, disrespecting our military. I'm like, in a sense, yo, shut up, man. That has nothing to do with the military at all. It's just like, it's just such a weak argument, and pretty much they get their talking points from, CNN, Fox, etc. And that's just kind of what it tells me. The way I hear, when I see it, and the things they say, I'm like, man, you got this straight from Bill O'Reilly or Megyn Kelly or somebody, or Sean Hannity. That's exactly what it looks like when I see it. No thought was put into whatever it is they wrote out.
You know what I thought is always interesting is, take something like the NBA, where you have the owners who are like, they're about free market, free enterprise, because they are the ones who, benefit the most from something like that. But if the players uniformly decide, okay, we're going to wear a shirt to recognize, Black Lives Matter or something like that, then all of a sudden, rather than taking that mentality of the free market and free enterprise and saying like, well, if that's how they want to voice themselves, that's fine, let their sponsorships determine whether or not they'll get backlash for that. They want to have that, well, wait, now you're going too far because now you're disrupting our personal interests. And I think we run the country the same way, that everybody wants to be free until it affects them. Then all of a sudden they want rules and regulation. So it's just, I think it speaks to a lot of the double standards that we're seeing, and I don't know. I mean, I think we live in a time where if you do have something like athletes who, for African American communities, as well as other minority communities, you have, that is their representation. Like otherwise it's a white guy in an office somewhere that's supposed to represent a culture that they're not even that well established with or connected to. So I always thought that was interesting to see that we have these gaps, and then the second that those prominent figures within those minority communities can actually step out and say something politically, now all of a sudden there's this backlash and everything. And yeah, Q, I agree with everything you're saying with that.
Let me make one last point too, just to kind of piggyback off what you said. So when you historically think about, Wilma Rudolph, when you think about Jim Brown, when you think about Muhammad Ali, and just in this case, Colin Kaepernick, when these sports figures, iconic sports figures, were talking against the injustice was happening, people did not like him at all. Nobody liked Muhammad Ali, as people know when he could speak, you know. But the moment he could not speak anymore, all of a sudden, you know, everybody's on the Muhammad Ali bandwagon. Everybody talking about how revered he was. But before, they didn't like him. And if they could have probably took him out, you know, without no recourse, they probably would have. They didn't like him when he was talking and speaking against the injustices, you know, at all. It was only when he was silent, could not talk anymore, that people started to gravitate to him more, because he could not speak out against that stuff anymore. You know, so it's the same thing here, you know. Say what you want to say about Colin Kaepernick's skill set, you know, but before he still had a relatively, you know, good reputation around the league. Now, I could probably see him getting released, maybe traded. You know, I'm pretty sure maybe within the next week or so, we're going to publicly hear, you know, some sponsorships pulling their dollars from him, you know, but that's just what I see all the time, you know, and it's just business as usual. It's just kind of how society operates.
So I'm looking at his Twitter right now, and he's doubling down. The last tweet that he retweeted is an article from the Maine governor, the governor of Maine, saying, "You shoot at the enemy, and the enemy right now are people of color or people of Hispanic origin." So it sounds like he's not backing down. He knows that there's going to be repercussions. He knows that there's going to be a problem, but he's using, you know, his position to get it out there, to put the words out. Like you were saying with Ali, you know, some of these great athletes, you know, you look back and go, oh, they were so great, we loved them the whole time, and it's like, no,
you did.
You would have shot his ass if you had 2 seconds and could have got away with it a little bit. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see. I would be really surprised though to see some of his sponsors drop him, because it is a First Amendment issue, where he didn't say anything. He didn't say, you know, America sucks balls. He said, hey, there's problems going on, and I'm not going to stand to honor that right now. So it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, I would be surprised to see any of the big sponsors drop him, because he was simply, you know, essentially you're saying what he said is wrong. And that's a fine line if you're a big company. To say, hey, you shouldn't talk about that.
Yeah. Well, see, gentlemen, this is where I would love for us to continue to talk about this. So we're at about 11 minutes. You guys want to keep talking about it, or you want to move on to today's topic?
I've said what I need to say on it.
Yeah, I think let's move on, but it'd be interesting to kind of revisit this in a week or two, or a month or two, or whatever, and see what the actual backlash was, kind of to look and see if there was any. How did it play out?
Well, I think this will be tying into a lot of other issues too that we'll be talking about on here, which are, you know, race issues, police brutality, all these things, because that's what he's speaking out about. So I think it'll all kind of tie together. But yeah. So so moving on, when we were discussing ideas for today's topic, Kevin, you were mentioning that you wanted to cover something about the primaries.
Yeah. So August 30th, I was looking up to see. There may be states that don't have their final primary of the year that date, but I know a lot of them do. So what this is, you know, essentially, if you have a contested election, you have 2 Democrats running, 2 Republicans running, whatever it may be. This is the primary election that lets you know who's about to go to the general election. So this is the last chance to pick, you know, using the presidential one, which everyone's familiar with. This is the last chance to stop Donald Trump or those like him before he goes on to be the guy. He's it. The primary's over. It's now between politician A and politician B. So this is, you know, it's a fairly important one, and I think it's one that a lot of people sit out, which is unfortunate, because when you sit this one out, you can't really complain about the general election. Oh, I don't like that. These are my 2 choices. Well, you could have picked a different choice early on. You could have helped make it so it wasn't, you know, Hillary or Donald Trump, or in the case of, you know, more locally, you have Senate seats, you have House seats, you have state Senate, state House, you have all of these kind of elections going on, and this is the last chance to really try to figure out who's going to be there.
So, Kevin, can I ask you something?
No, absolutely not.
I say this I say this in all sincerity, and I know that's why you're rejecting this. Why should I care? Why should I care about this? And I feel like I'm speaking for a lot of people in the sense that one of the things that has always turned me off about politics, I know about policy. Politics is a little bit different. Knowing about the voting system, knowing about how all that works, I'm not as familiar with all that stuff. And one of the things that is the hardest for me to dial into is, one, I don't even know who my representatives are. I don't know how districts are cut up. I don't know any of that. And to do all that research seems like it'd be way too much effort. So because of that, I'm asking the question of, from a person who's coming from that place, because for me personally, I'm a little bit further along now, but I'm saying that's definitely where I was. I didn't care. These people may or may not make decisions that directly affect me, and you know, I'll still go about my life. You know, I won't say anything too dramatic. I think the only time I saw two decisions that were really big was when the state of Arizona cut education. That directly affected my position. That was the first time I was like, whoa, that was like a major decision that actually directly impacted me. And then in other ways, I think they're a little bit more subtle. So why should the average, not average, but maybe the person who's not as familiar or informed, why should they care?
Why should you care? Okay, so go back in history just a little bit here. Looking at Arizona-centric, it's where I live, so a lot of my examples will be here, but any other state, you're going to have these same type of examples. SB 1070, right? You have this bill, which is awful. National condemnation. Everyone's freaking out about it. Well, during the primaries, during the early parts, you had a chance to not send all those psychopaths down to Phoenix to do something like that. They're very clear. You know, if you take, you don't even have to spend a week doing this. You could spend an hour. You go through and say, who are my representatives? Click through their websites, read a few things, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is what they're about. Because it's not necessarily about what they have done. It's about using the laws, the things that you see that are unjust, that are, you know, or that are really favorable. Looking at those and saying, how do we make a better future, and are these the people that are going to help us get there? So if you're not someone who's engaged, then you're the average person. You know, most people are not engaged. Most people, at least for me, come election time, and it's never the primaries because nobody ever bothers to learn anything. It's the general election. I get hit up, who am I supposed to vote for? How do I vote on this? How do I vote on that? And I'm like, well, form an opinion. I mean, the information's out there. People are trying to get it to you, and nobody wants to think about it. Nobody wants to think. They're so wrapped up in their own life that they're just, you know, they're like, oh, I don't know. Both parties are the same. It doesn't matter who's there, all that bullshit. The problem is when you then get out of that and you turn around and go, oh, I don't like what they're doing. Well, fuck you. You had a chance to say something. You had a chance to get involved, and you decided it was too hard.
So if I can then, because Q, you and I were talking about this, because you know, like I was saying, if I'm not as familiar, it's a lot harder for me to do that. So to the point that you're making, Kevin, for those of us that, you know, we do want it easier, and I'm not saying that I don't want to engage, I'm not saying I don't want to vote, I'm saying it looks like it would take way too much effort, because the second you try to start looking for information is where you see how fragmented and scattered it is. And so, Q, this is what I wanted to... Go ahead.
There's a real basic point that I want to make, and I'm not... I'll talk a little bit more just briefly after it. That's where the party system comes into play. You know, that's where you vote Republican or Democrat or Libertarian or Green Party, because I don't want to know, but I know that this party tends to align with me. That's why they exist, right? To be able to keep things in that nice, tight little box that you can just go, oh, I like that box more than I like this box. So that's the basics of it. Doing that doesn't always work. You know, there's people on either side that are problematic. So.
Well, but that's where I feel like part of the issue comes down to, you know, I'm a no party preference, and the reason why is that I'm burnt out from both parties. So I can't. It's not that simple for me. I can't just go Democrat all the way down the check boxes. It's like it has to matter to me, because I'm going to have a viewpoint, an opinion about each issue. So I'm going to share my screen. This is actually a website that I came across. I actually think is a great central location to get an idea of what's going on with voting. So let me bring up my screen share here and see if that'll work here. So this website is called votesmart.org. And let me get that into place there. Okay. So votesmart.org. Oh, Lord, what's all this? Let's move over. Okay, everybody see that okay? Yeah? Cool.
Yep.
Yes.
So I've registered for this, and what this will do is it's a huge aggregate of state and federal elections. The local elections, I think it's a little bit harder for this one organization to collect that much information because that's even that much more scattered. But state and federal, they actually do a really good job of making it sort of a one-stop shop of how are you going to vote. So they have two buttons right here. One is Vote Easy and My Vote Smart, and what these will basically do is bring up a way to see who you align with. So if I click on Vote Easy Congressional, it's going to bring up a screen. Let's mute that. And in here, this is where it's going to lay out all the candidates who are running for House and the Senate. And eventually it will download.
Yeah.
Well, while it's downloading,
I would like to point out just a quick thing while we're waiting for that to load is, when it takes a little bit of time to actually learn the political structure, House, Senate, State House, State Senate, all the different bits and pieces. And that's where civics and education really would be necessary, is helping us understand that from a childhood age on so that we don't have to go through all this right now.
Well, ideally, and I would agree with you. Q, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I kind of side with Eric on this one. Now, I am aware of what's going on in politics from, the local, state, and federal. But I ask the question too, like, why should I care, right? And I know that's a very, and I'll say it like an ignorant way to kind of look at it, like, why should I care? Because we know we should care, but with everything going on, like in your personal lives, like in so many elections and so many different issues, like, why should I care? I think when we want to care, it's too late at that point. We start seeing big issues like, oh, how did we get here? But then it kind of goes to your point, Kevin, like, we didn't do any research, we didn't educate ourselves, and we let this happen. It was a small brush fire. Next thing you know, by the time we acknowledge it, it's an inferno, and it's too late. So, and
yeah, because you have people like myself screaming, guys, pay attention, get involved, do something, vote, do so, and people are like, change the channel, I don't want to do that anymore. And all of a sudden, you have protests, riots in the streets, and everyone's like, oh shit, how'd this happen? Well, remember when we said that guy was a racist piece of shit, and you guys voted for him anyways because he was the incumbent? Here we go. This is where we're at.
Right. So, to that point, though, let me bring this back up here. So, this website, because of what it will allow me to do, so right now I have the state of Arizona that's plugged in here. You can do it for any state. You can even come into here where it says find your district. You can put in your zip code, and it will let you know exactly who's running. So if I'm going in here, and let's see, find your district, find another state. All right, so right here, and when it says put in your zip code, so this is letting you know there are 34 in the state of Arizona. There are 34 candidates who are running for a House of Representative system, 5 who are running for the Senate, and 10 congressional races. Now, what I want to point out, though, and this is where I want to kind of get to the Politics 101, this right here are how many seats are in the Senate. We have 50 states. Each state gets 2 senators. That makes up the United States Senate. In the House of Representatives, we have a total of 435 seats available. And what we're looking at right now, you could tell that red is for Republican, blue is for Democrat, and then in the bottom left there we have a couple for independents. But this is where we can see that in the House of Representatives, the majority are Republicans. This next image I think is fascinating. This right here shows all 435 seats and gives you a breakdown of how much each state holds in the House of Representatives. So if you start on the upper left where California is, they have, and this is by proportion, by the way, so every state in the House of Representatives gets so many representatives per district based on the proportion. So California has 53 seats in the House of Representatives. Texas is the next in line, then Florida, then New York, then Illinois, and over here, where we have Arizona, we have 9 seats available. So this kind of gives you an idea, when you make your way all the way to the upper right, of how many states actually have a voting say in the House of Representatives. So just between the first 2 states alone, between California and Texas, you can see that they actually hold quite a bit of weight just from those 2 states. So I wanted to show this so people can get an idea of how this sort of hierarchy works, because say here in Arizona we have 9 congressional districts and I'm voting in my district for one of these seats, one person to represent one of those seats. So when we come back to votesmart.org and say here I put in my zip code and then I hit go, this is where it's going to bring me all of the candidates who are running for office. Now, this is what I like about this website, and this is where it makes it really easy. Up here at the top here, you have issues: abortion, budget, crime, economy, education, energy, environment, guns, healthcare, immigration, marriage, national security, and social security. Say we take the issue of guns, for example, and, oops, wrong screen. We take the issue of guns here. And then it says, do you generally support gun control legislation? For me, with my interests, I do. I'm not saying I want to come and take people's guns away necessarily, but I also don't think we should legalize having guns on campuses of universities and colleges. So yes, I do like legislation. Now, this is where it's saying, how important is this issue to you? Very. Based upon the candidates who are running in their position, it will let me know who is the best match for me. So if I want to vote for that particular issue, this guy, Sean Red, would be the best person that would fall in line with my values for this, so I should vote for him. Now what I can do is, once I click on him, this will give up his whole breakdown for each of those issues. You can see we have abortion, budget, environment, guns, all the way down. And then you have the candidates' answers and then my answer. So I can actually go through this and say, for abortion, I'm pro-choice, and I'm just going to randomly click these, and then you'll see what happens. So say I just keep going down this whole list of these different issues and where I generally stand on these. What it'll wind up doing is, you can tell in the background that things are shifting around. It's going to reveal the candidate who more closely aligns with my particular value system. So in the House of Representatives, Sean Red, who's a Republican, would be my best match for however I mark those issues. And over here on the left, Claire Van Stenwyck, that's a name, and Ann Kirkpatrick would be my best choice. So for those of you that maybe are a little inundated by all the information that's out there, which oftentimes is just way too much to process, I feel like this is a good place to at least start, because, Kevin, to your point, this is where I think a deeper issue comes into play, where if people are saying that they're having a problem with government, this is how we can start to get into that hierarchy. So correct me if I'm wrong then. When you vote for the House and the Senate, our vote actually counts, right? There's no delegates or electoral college involved with that?
Correct. Yeah, the Electoral College exists just for presidential. The one thing I do want to point out is, so on that website that you just brought up, it's actually out of date because a lot of those people have dropped out since then. So even if you do align with someone, I saw on the House, it was Carlisle Begay in the middle there. He's dropped out. Let's see. Alexander Malusky has dropped out. A lot of them will.
Now, when you say dropped out, do you mean they've suspended their campaign, or they've actually dropped out?
They've dropped out and endorsed someone else.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's something that if you end up, let's say, with Carlisle Begay, you end up really agreeing with him on everything. You looking, oh, he's dropped out. Well, who did he endorse? Because that's who he's gonna, he's saying this person aligns with my values. So there's a little bit more this website could. I mean, it's hard to keep it up to date on all 50 states with all these different elections, but I would really encourage. I mean, it's a cool website. It's a cool idea. But make sure that you don't just go one thing. Abortion. Are they pro or for? Pro or against? Now, okay, that's who I'm going to vote for. Well, they might disagree with you on every other point. So.
Well, so this is where, to your point, because I think you are making a good point here. Depending on how you fill out that little survey, this is where the front runners here are the ones that were more generally fit your more general values. So like you're saying, say if Begay here is out, well, let's say, for example, Sean Redd, for whatever reason was out. The next person in line, the next person in line would be Tom O'Halloran or Paul. And I can't think of his name. Begay. So,
Sheriff.
Sheriff, sorry.
Yeah, he's a special kind of nuts, but the interesting thing that I'll point out is I am definitely more involved with the political sphere than probably anybody listening, probably 90% of America. But I know on a first name basis, most of our city council, most of the candidates running, at least on the Democratic side, for all of these offices up to Senate. Because I actually care enough to go talk to them and say, hey, I saw how you voted on that. What the hell were you thinking? Or, hey, good job. I like that you're doing that. Because I want to inform myself. I want to know who the people out there that are representing me are, and let them know that if they're going to go a little bit nuts, then it's not a free pass. Someone's watching.
Hey, Kevin, real quick.
Yeah.
Maybe you can kind of speak to. You said you've gone up to some of these representatives and you talked to them and you challenged them maybe on some of the things they voted on that maybe you weren't in line with. So can you kind of like maybe explain to the people listening as well, so maybe they feel a little bit more comfortable approaching these representatives, because maybe they just vote them in and that's it. They don't know how to approach them. They don't know what to say. What are the steps to do that? Do you just go approach them? Did you call them? Like, how did that work? And what was your takeaway when you walked away in a specific point where you challenged them on something they voted for that you didn't align with?
So to the first part of it, how do you get to them? A lot of times, if they're Democrat or Republican, you can talk to that local party, county, state, district, whatever it is, and they'll put out newsletters saying, hey, we're having this events with these candidates coming. Now, the candidates are out there shaking hands, kissing babies, trying to, appear all cool. So if you show up and talk to them, don't show up and stick a camera in their face. You might actually get an answer if you go up and just talk to them. But a lot of the times you'll see, Senate candidates, congressional candidates in your hometown just showing up at a little meet and greet that is open to the public. You show up and, hey, the best way to get a good answer or to actually have a conversation is to have a conversation. If you go up and you say, listen, you son of a bitch, how dare you vote for that? Well, the conversation's over. They're not going to do that. But if you say, hey, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that vote because I support it or I'm a little concerned, can you help me understand? A lot of them will talk to you. Some of them might go, oh, we'll schedule an appointment with my person. They're blowing you off. That's a blow off right there. But if you call their scheduler, if you actually push it, you're going to, there's a good chance you'll get in the room. There's a lot of times, right now is a great time of year because there's all these campaign events. Show up to some of them. Talk to people. Hey, I'd like to, even if you're talking to chief of staff or scheduler, hey, I'm concerned about this vote. Do you know what's going on with that? You're going to get more information than you probably would if you just Googled it.
Well, let me ask you this, and actually, Q, this is directed at you. Is there also a difference? Because when I was living in Los Angeles, I just felt like there was this huge disconnect that I wasn't even close to getting to my local government. If I got a ticket, that would be maybe as close as I would get. But Q, do you see a difference in maybe say like a big city as compared to like a smaller city? Because like in Flagstaff, I mean, dude, I bump into council members all the time randomly. So there's I think a little bit of a more tighter connection where if I wanted to bring up an issue, there's not as much of this gap that I feel is there. But when I was living in Los Angeles, it just seemed like it was a huge gap there. You feel the same?
Yeah, and so I'll just use the example years back when we was doing the green team. Remember we ran into Stephen Choi and we talked to Suki Kane here in Irvine.
Right.
So yeah, Irvine's it's a smaller city. I think people are more accessible, but I think when you go to like Los Angeles, unless you're of Kevin's mindset, and you're really involved in politics, then you go seek out these people. But it's so big, so much stuff is going on in LA, and maybe you're turned off because of police interactions or just things you see on TV. You don't care at that point, So I think you kind of have like a certain mindset to seek out your people in LA. I mean, it's so big, It's kind of hard to be like, hey, let me go see who my representative is, and let me go talk to them about this issue. It's just way too much going on for you to really care. And I know that sounds like an excuse or whatever, but that's just a reality, out there, Whereas here in Irvine, I've ran into, like a Stephen Choi. I've ran into the mayor, Suki Kane. You see him out and about, and you can go talk to them. They will actually entertain your conversation, and they won't give you the schedule something with my secretary, because I think Irvine's so small, and it's a very affluent city, that I think they kind of have an obligation to talk to you, because they really don't know who you are. They don't know if I'm some, crazy millionaire, and the last thing you want is, to piss somebody off in Irvine, because that definitely could put you out your seat real quick if the word gets out. So,
yeah. Yeah, there definitely is an effort that has to go into seeking these folks out. But I think it's a lot easier, even in a city like LA. I mean, they're doing these campaign meetings. They're going out and knocking on doors a lot of times. Literally, the candidate for Senate will, hey, can I talk to you a little bit about him? Run for Senate. This does still happen. So really, I mean, the best thing you could do if you want to get in touch with your candidates is figure out. I mean, sign up for the Republican and the Democrat, your local party email list. Yeah, you're going to get spammed for days, but you're going to see where these people are. Hey, is it a fundraiser or is it a meet and greet? Is it a town hall where you can just ask a question and you can get answers to other people answering, or all these people are asking questions that they're answering? These things exist. They're not just on CNN. They're in the middle of your neighborhood. You just have to actually figure out when, where, and how to get in. And most people aren't going to do it. But everyone that wants to, well, I should say most people that want to, totally can.
Do you think it's a matter of technology? Because like when I go through this website, votesmart.org, this makes it easy for me because, and I'm just trying to remember my time in Los Angeles, and Q, I think you're right on point. I was so caught up in everything else that was going on. Not even a small part of me was interested in trying to get to know council members, trying to even wrap my head around congressional districts and how everything worked from there. I would vote for president. That would be about the only thing I'd be slightly familiar with. And maybe some of the propositions, if the propositions have made some headlines, that might be also another way that I might kind of pay attention and know what I'm voting for. So again, though, at least with this website, I feel like there's some technology that's out there. I wanted to ask you both this. Do you guys think that it would make sense that if you're running for public office, one, that it should be funded publicly, and then also, should there be a technology out there that can also be funded by the government to make sure that all that information gets out there, so an organization like VoteSmart can do more? And would that allow for us to maybe even vote online? I mean, we can do Apple Pay on our phones now because of a fingerprint identification. Why can't that work for voting?
Let me, I'll just kind of speak to that at first. Politics, it's not sexy at all. It's almost like math. Unless you're, inclined to it, then you kind of get it. It requires effort. It requires you to go out there and seek knowledge, to apply it. I think that the technology is out there. There's plenty of apps. You just showed a website. It's out there. It's whether you want to go out there and seek it. Like nobody's going to come to your door and be like, hey, here's all the information you need for the upcoming election. It's like either you care or you don't. You know, I'm a little bit more conscious now, so I definitely pay attention to what's going on in the local, you know, state and federal. But the information's out there.
But they do come to your house and give you the information. There's, at least here in Arizona, they send a little it's like a almost newspaper type feel of all the ballot propositions, the candidates, all that stuff. That's it. There you go. I mean, yes, it's the Reader's Digest version. You're not getting the backstory necessarily unless you look further. But that information, it comes to your house. It shows up, and you flip through it and go, oh, okay. Or you don't, and you just vote D or R or just for president or don't vote at all like a lot of people do. But the one thing that I really think so I was actually talking to Michelle Reagan, who is the Secretary of State for Arizona. She's a Republican, and it was right after the Maricopa County did something stupid, and there was where they didn't have enough polling locations, that sort of thing. And she came up with like, you know, what can we do better? And we were talking about the idea of how do you actually, you know, we're talking about gerrymandering districts that are created so that you get a certain type of vote. Like, oh, I'm going to carve the line here so that I get Republicans all the time, just because that's how I'm splitting up the Democrats. But we were talking about how is there a fair way to actually break things up so that people actually feel like their vote matters, that you're not disenfranchising a whole section of community. And that's a really hard thing to figure out, because the point I was making to her is, you know, she was bringing up some ideas, you know, about can you map it out with a computer or whatever, and I said you can, but it matters who makes the program, because if the Democrats make it, then the Republicans aren't going to trust the results. If the Republicans make it, the Democrats aren't going to trust the results. So how do you know, because we've become so partisan now, how do you actually find a way to carve things up that makes sense and is equitable and is fair and lets people feel like they matter without all the shenanigans that we've been seeing for the last, you know, couple of decades? That's a big step. If we can get some of that, then, you know, maybe you actually see a little bit more involvement in the community, because I definitely know there's certain politicians that don't even have to campaign. They don't have to show up day one. They just sit back and get voted for, because they know that their district votes overwhelmingly Republican or Democrat, and the fact that they are the Democrat or the Republican means they win. They don't have to keep people happy.
That's you know, one thing that I've been thinking about too, if we think about a larger context of democracy and what democracy is supposed to mean, one of the things that I've also learned, and this is where, you know, even though I feel like I'm literally forcing myself to pay attention to these things, even though I'd rather be focusing on other things, but democracy doesn't work if you're passive. And Kevin, I think that's why in the beginning when you were expressing, you know, that you get pissed off, I think that's why people who do put some skin in the game do get upset, because they're like, look, you know, take for example the Democratic primary with Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. I admit I did not know the details of how that system worked at all. All I knew is I liked what Bernie stood for. He had a moral voice, and I wanted that voice to run for president. So that's what I was there for. But what I learned through this entire process is that, yes, it is rigged, but the reason why it's rigged is because if you look at the system and the way it's set up, the Democrats had their party. Hillary's been a part of that party for a very, very long time, and she has helped to establish that party, where Bernie Sanders, being an independent, just kind of came on sort of last second saying, I'd like to run for president, and I'd like to do so on your platform. So I think that was awakening, you know, an awakening call for me, because what I learned in this whole election cycle and the whole process of what's been going on is that, and this is what Bernie actually, I think, helped to establish, so I think he did the Democrats a favor, is you have to get involved. There's no passive voice that will work in a democracy. If you want to step up, if you want things to change, there's only one way to do that. And that's why, for me, I'm trying to look at it as, well, okay, how can I find an educational tool or a resource that can help to connect those gaps for those that, yes, your vote counts and your opinion counts, but they're so disinterested because, you know, it could be for whatever reasons, but it can invite people into that process. So, I think the passive thing doesn't work.
There's a perception, I think, that people are not invited to the process. And in some places that may be true. There may be active suppression where they're trying to keep people the hell out of the process. But especially local elections, you're going to find that these people are hungry to talk to you. They want to know what you think. They want to know, because that's how they get elected. When you get into higher office, a lot of it is who gets the most airplay on CNN or Fox News that's going to win. But a lot of the local stuff, I mean, you have a seat at the table. All you have to do is show up and take it.
Q, what are your thoughts?
No, I totally agree. I think we all have to do better. I know for myself, I know you've mentioned it as well. Like, we have to do better. We have to be a little bit more conscious about what's going on. We can't complain after the fact when we actually had an opportunity to avert, what could be coming, in a negative fashion. So, yeah, I mean, I've always been under the mindset, and that's why, like, in this point, I defer to Kevin,
That's a mistake.
Well, just in this, because, you do have more knowledge on this than I do, and so I know a lot of people, a lot of my friends, some of them like, well, my vote doesn't count, and I know we know that on the presidential, but then it kind of filters down to the local too. Like, if it doesn't count up here, then why does it count down here? They're not, I'm not represented, they're not going to really fight for my interests up there, and it's definitely the wrong mindset to have too. You have to go out there and push, and put some skin in the game. So,
well, so when you have the Electoral College, it's hard to say that your vote counts, because popular vote can win, and then Electoral College, gives you George Bush. But the reality is, all the votes for Bernie in that presidential primary, all of that, early on, a lot of people said Bernie's job is to bring Hillary left. It's to pull her more progressive, and in that, they won. That's what they did. They got her actually headed to a left-leaning course, because she can be middle right, is kind of where I like to describe both her and Obama to a lesser degree as an older school moderate Republican. They're not real progressive. They're not really pushing the left issue. They're towards the middle. They're not going to break real hard to the right, but you look at like on gay marriage, Obama early on was like, and then Joe Biden went out and was like, yeah, we love the gays, and Obama was like, yeah, I guess we love the gays. So there was, it wasn't like Obama came out and was like, brothers and sisters of the LGBTQ community, we're with you. No, it was, I'm evolving on the issue. So I think what Bernie did, and why everyone's vote does matter, is because showing that he had credibility within the community, within especially the youth, it brought everyone to the left. They said, we got to take this seriously, because if we don't, I mean, if Hillary didn't start pretending to be Bernie Sanders on a regular basis, he would have won. She saw that he was resonating with some folks, and she took a few of his talking points, and the people that were kind of on the fence went, oh, okay, well, I guess, probably her, because she has a better chance. But had she drawn that hard line, I think you'd see Bernie running right now, because it was such a popular thing that he was doing. And that's to every person that showed up at a rally, to every person that voted in the primaries, that's on them. Their vote does matter, even though their candidate isn't going to be the candidate.
Well, so one other thing that I wanted to point out, and I'm going to bring it back to the screen share here. On this website, votesmart.org, the other thing that I wanted to point out here, let me make sure I present that to everyone. So, and I would say I couldn't find this on their homepage because they got some animation stuff going on there that's preventing me from seeing this. So this web link, votesmart.org/elections/ballot-measures/2016. This right here will let you select your state. So if I select Arizona here, it will bring up all of the ballot measures that are going to be on this year's election. It'll let me know what is pending. So, for example, on November 8th, we're going to have an Arizona Trust Land Management and Budget Reconciliation Amendment that'll be on the ballot, and then also If we go down finance and banking, marijuana legalization, these are all pending. So if you want to at least get up to speed on some level with the election of who are going to be running for federal positions, and then it also has state in here too, this is a way to also look at ballot measures. So I just wanted to point that out, that I think this is, like I was saying before, a really good resources just to kind of get caught up to speed with what will be directly affecting whoever's watching this. If you're looking, how do I at least get remotely involved so when I vote it matters, votesmart.org is a really good resource for that. So.
The one thing I do want to point out on that is you had it broken down on their constitutional versus these other things. Constitutional ones really matter because those are a pain in the ass to overturn. I mean, you really, like, the Proposition 123, like you see in Arizona, just completely screwed over our schools. And people were screaming for it, but the teachers were behind it because they got a pay raise. So I mean, those ones matter because they're hard to overturn. If you get it, if they get it by and everyone hates it, it's real hard to get it undone.
And what would be the process of that? I mean, is that just where, you go to, and this is another thing too, I feel like at some point I should get a little bit more familiarity with our court systems, because what court system would that work through? Is it the Supreme Court of the state? No. And then if people still want to appeal it, then they can appeal that to the Supreme Court, or?
So the legal argument, the legal way to get rid of it is on a constitutionality or constitutionally, it somehow is against the Constitution itself, so therefore it cannot be law. If it is constitutional, right? It doesn't, it's not unconstitutional. I think you need a supermajority of votes from the public or from the House and the Senate. You're talking about supermajority. That's not real easy to do. It's hard to get people to agree on anything, let alone an overwhelming majority to agree on something. So, just make sure to read those very carefully, because if it looks like something that's a bad idea, you might want to come out hard against it, because if it goes through, you're stuck with it. So, yeah, I think we've probably bored the people enough with all this talk on politics. But the last thing I want to say on this is, take it a little bit personally. Who you vote for, take 5 minutes a week. 5 minutes a week, and look up a candidate. You don't have to necessarily look up every candidate. Look up, a senator or city council. Just take a look. Spend 5 minutes looking around, and at least you're that much more informed, so you're not going to be voting for someone that is in conflict with your own belief structure.
Yeah, and I would also say, too, if folks who are maybe tuning in a little bit later in today's episode, if you go to votesmart.org, they have a link on there that says Vote Easy, and it has a presidential and congressional tab. That's a really good way to put in your zip code, and then you can see all the relevant candidates that are going to be in your particular area, where their decisions obviously are going to represent a national representation, but their influence will have an impact with how local government makes some of their decisions. Not always, but some influence there. And I think that's where, the first thing that I try to, remind people, and this is where when I had this paradigm shift, I noticed that it made a world of difference. The people who are going to impact your life the most are local politicians. They're the ones that make the rules and the laws that apply to the day-to-day, everyday life that you live, and obviously federal and state play a role in that too. But as we're seeing with, and I hate saying marijuana because the history, that's just, it's got a negative connotation, but cannabis legalization is a really good issue to look at that, where if you take the states like Colorado and Washington, on a state level, they're basically telling the federal government, screw you guys, we're going to do our thing. And now we have all these businesses booming, and we have all this tax revenue that's being generated for those local communities. So I would definitely say, try to get an idea who's on your local council, who's your local mayor, and just get a sense of what are their positions, because they're the ones who are going to be voting on actual legislation that'll impact our lives.
Yeah, and we are still early in this whole process, but if there's questions you have, whatever, hit the comments section, put it down there so at least we have a chance to see it, and we can take a look at it. Questions, criticism, praise, the fact that you love my Ninja Turtle, whatever it is, put it in there so that we actually can see if it's working.
Q, you're getting quiet over there.
Oh no, I'm just taking it all in. And to your point, the local elections are very important. The local government policies have immediate effects. On the citizens in their districts. So, if you think about trash not being collected, potholes in the road, healthcare in the schools and stuff like that, local school healthcare, like, it's very important. So if you're turned off by the presidential election or whatever, just really kind of hone in on your local election, and kind of, build some momentum and go from there. I need to do the same thing. I'm not gonna lie, so I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I'm all knowing. No, I need to do better, and I will. So.
Well, and that you actually made a good point there. That I'll just clarify. You don't have to vote. You don't have to fill in every bubble on the ballot. If you feel like I don't want to vote for stuff I don't know about, leave that line blank. Focus on the ones that you think matter to you the most. If you don't care who's president, well, it might be a mistake from my point of view, but you don't have to pick. It's okay. No, Obama doesn't show up and be like, you should have voted. You're good. You just leave it blank. Vote your conscience. Vote for the people that are actually the ones you feel align with you. If someone doesn't, if it's none of the above, well, that's an option.
You know what? On that point too, because this is something that I definitely want to bring up, and this is where I'm using my pointy finger. So I'm gonna do it the politician point. One of the things that really turned me off during this whole Democratic primary, I got bullied from Democratic insiders because I was a Bernie fan. And I would definitely tell people out there too, don't let anybody intimidate you or try to force you to vote for something that you're either unsure of or that you're against. Voting is in private, and that's not something that you have to reveal, and it's not something that you should feel intimidated by. And that's just something that I got to tell you. I had a couple of sort of Democrat insiders, some people that were actual delegates, some people that went to the convention that had inside information. And when I would make my argument why I was supporting Bernie Sanders, I would get berated. I mean, I would be belittled that I don't know what I'm talking about and I'm dumb. And it's just like, okay, let me maybe put this into perspective, like an analogy. If I'm walking through a forest and I come across a dead body, I may not know the details of how that person died, but I know I'm looking at a dead body. So if I'm looking at the Bernie Sanders campaign and I'm saying I know that the system isn't working right, there's way too much money in here, there's way too much corruption, not knowing the details of that process doesn't mean I don't still see the end result. And that's one of the things that within my trying to deliberate over, okay, I need to learn more, I need to check my own naiveness, and that's where now that I have a better sense of how that system works in general, I'm still voting the same, but now I just have a better idea of how it works. So I'm hoping that other folks can start to tune into that as well, where maybe you might not know the details of the system, and that's fine, but that doesn't mean that your opinion is valued any less. So kind of, Kevin, to your point, if there's an issue that does strike a chord with you or a candidate that does strike a chord within you, only vote for that, but at least put out that vote. And yeah, the federal presidential campaign is a little bit murkier because our votes really go to the delegates or the electoral college, and then they're the ones who ultimately vote the people in. But congressional votes, ballot measures, propositions, those votes do count. So, and local elections as well.
Yeah, and I think if people love to be bullies on the internet, they get behind their keyboard and they're like, "Wah!" They're ready to go. I'm ready to fight. So if you're trying to have a conversation and people are just being belligerent, you have one or two options. You can turn them off, right, and just go, okay, whatever, I don't care. Or you can say fuck them if they can't take a joke and just start spouting off nonsense and just watch them lose their damn minds. It's kind of funny. But what I would recommend is that when they're telling you, even if they're being assholes doing it, if they're telling you why you're wrong, at least consider their point. They may be assholes. They may not actually have a point. But at least take the time to listen to them a little bit, because if nothing else, you're going to get stronger in your argument for your position, because you now understand the opposition's argument.
That's a good point. That's a real good point.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, we're at about time, but I was actually thinking we could leave off. Q, I'd like to just get your feedback on something real quick, because I feel like you and I are in the same boat in the sense that we do want to get more involved. So how would you approach this? How do you think? What do you think would be a good idea of, how do I start to just get my feet wet, but enough that I actually think it'll make some kind of an impact?
To me, as an academic, I have to educate myself, be familiar with all the candidates that are available, their positions, and just understand what's going on, understand the concept. And then for myself, knowing me, I need to go out there and spread the word to friends, whether, it's putting on Facebook, talking to people directly, joining an organization, just is getting out there, getting your voice heard, because sometimes it could be my voice that broke it down to a person to a point where they really understand it. They're like, oh, okay, I get, now that you said it, I understand it. Or maybe because they're familiar with me, they're like, you know what, if Quan's doing it, I know Quan's pedigree, let me get on board too. So the power of influence, the power of education, and the way you disseminate your message too as well is very important. So that's what I would say for me. If I was going to get involved, or if anybody else wants to get involved, educate yourself and then educate your friends, and just build it from there. That's really the only way you can do it from a grassroots perspective. So.
Yeah, so if someone goes to that Vote Smart website and is looking at it and they're like, hey, I align with Tom O'Halloran, Ann Kirkpatrick, Carlisle Big A, whoever it is. Okay, so there's this magical tool in the world. It's called Facebook. You go there, you type in their name, and you hit like or whatever, or you just troll their page and look at it and see. Here's the two things to look at. One is, what is the information they're putting out? Is that something that you agree with what they're putting out? The second one is, who's agreeing with them? So if you get a bunch of people that are, their little Facebook icon is the Confederate flag, and they're like, yeah, well, you might want to look a little harder at that candidate. If you get a bunch of people that are showing empathy, compassion, or just intelligence, well-spoken on the issues because they've taken the time to research it, PhDs in the subject matter, whatever, look at who's backing them and read some of those supporting arguments, because people aren't going to lie. Well, people are going to lie, but people aren't going to lie to you the same way that the politician's going to lie to you and try to hone their message so completely. You're going to get the unfiltered in the comments. So take a look at that. See what people are really saying about it, and go from there.
The comment section is a hidden gem.
All right. Well, gentlemen, any last remarks or comments?
Get out there. Educate yourself. Just for yourself, just to enrich yourself as a person, if anything. Just so you're aware, so you don't get blindsided, and you don't have to always hear things after the fact on news. That you follow it, you understand what's going on. Raise awareness.
Yeah, find people like me that have no life whatsoever and do this, that really just geek out on it, and start asking questions. Because if you come at me from a Republican, standpoint, a very conservative, I'm not going to try to talk you out of your position. I mean, I might make fun of you if we're friends, but I'm not going to say you're wrong and here's why you're wrong. I'm going to say, here's why I think these candidates are good. Here's why you might like these other guys. I'll get you started. I'll help. Whether you agree with me or not, I want you to vote more than I want to be right. So, reach out to folks that know a little bit more, and hopefully they're not douchebags.
Well, on that note, I think you guys are both making actually really good points, because, I got to say, bless Bernie Sanders, for me at least, because he personally invited me into a system that I just felt was just going over my head. And I didn't really want to invest that much time and energy into it. But now that I am starting to really wake up into how that political system works, it definitely makes me feel like I'm more invested, and I think that's going to continue to grow. So yeah, I think that'll wrap it up for this week's episode. For everybody that's been tuning in and watching the show, thanks for joining us. This is the Oracle In podcast, and we'll be doing episodes variously throughout, I'll say time, because there's not really a time limit on this. And feel free to leave any comments or questions that you might have, especially with questions, because, you know, even if somebody brings up a point, we might be bringing it up in an episode to be like, you know what, this individual had a perspective that we're not incorporating into this. I mean, for example, I would like to get, you know, diversity. You know, we're three men that are on here talking, but what about a woman's point of view and how she sees a lot of these things? So I'd like to invite everybody into the discussion, and it doesn't matter whatever your political leanings are, even if you're apolitical. You know, we're interested to see with, you know, how can we bring about a bigger conversation. So on that, thanks everybody for tuning in, and peace out till next time.
Bye, friends.